Over the past year, I read a lot of books. Actually, I didn't. I don't know. To put a number on it, I read 24 books this year, which compared to how much I used to read, especially before I had kids, doesn't feel like a lot, but who knows, maybe this is just my new rhythm. What was weird this year though, where there were some weeks where I would just blaze through like a couple of books within that week, and then other times where I would just start reading a book and just let it stretch on for over a month. I figured I would just, with 24 titles, that's the perfect amount. I can just go over them. These aren't really going to be reviews or rankings, but I just thought it would be fun to, talk about them. All right, the first book I read of the year was Saving Time by Jenny Odell. I'm not surprised I read a book related to time at the beginning of the year. I think the previous year, one of my favorites was 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. I think 4,000 Weeks was so well done. I liked a lot of what was going on in Saving Time. There were times where the writing style seemed to be kind of lectury. There seems to have emerged this new style of writing where you're kind of over-explaining concepts to your readers in a way where, I don't know, it takes away a lot of the intimacy, because it sounds like you're not able to take for granted the fact that you already understand the same touch points, the same references. What a wild diatribe. Saving Time was a pretty good book. Okay, number 2, How to Have a Viking Funeral by Kyle Sheely. This book was cool. So I don't even know how to describe who Kyle Sheely is or what he does. He just posts a lot of hilarious stuff online. This book is all about, he pulls a lot of things that are kind of like pranks. This is about the time, and this isn't really a prank, but he basically celebrated a milestone birthday, was it 30, by constructing a Viking ship out of cardboard and setting fire to it, as one does in a Viking funeral. And he decided to make this a bigger ordeal by making that ship life-size, and to not just burn down the ship, but also fill it up with note cards of people's regrets. So it really was like a book about regrets and moving on. I read the book Dark Matter by Blake Crouch at the recommendation of Deanna. So one of the big themes in this book is would you have chosen the life that you are living right now if you had the option to do things differently or to start all over again? It kind of explores a lot of these in a parallel timeline sort of things, Everything Everywhere All at Once. A lot of multiverses going on in the world of fiction these days. Dark Matter was a really good read. There was a lot of excitement to it and a lot of chasing around type stuff. It just got made into a Apple TV series. I haven't watched it yet, but it came out earlier this year too. I like sci-fi when there's just enough of an element of sci-fi to set the plot into motion, but not where you're diving too deep into exploring this universe. It's still more about the relationships and the decisions and all that good stuff. I read Esau McCauley's book How Far to the Promised Land as part of a book club we did at my workplace, and this was a really good one. This was a memoir in which he explores his childhood, growing up black, his spiritual life. He's written stuff like Reading While Black, which is all about scripture and biblical theology through an African-American lens and learning how to read it that way. I've always enjoyed reading his thoughts, but getting to read his own retelling of his life experiences was really good. This is probably one of the books that I would just recommend most broadly from what I read this year. You Could Make This Life Beautiful by Maggie Smith. Maggie Smith, the poet, not the actress. R.I.P. to the actress. Yeah, if just hearing people kind of open up their hearts and let the content spill, if that gets to be a bit much for you, this might not be your thing, but I like the writing, and I learned a lot from it about how to tap into vulnerability as a creative. Okay, so the next couple books on my list are about Finland, because I took that trip to Finland with my kid back in March, and so I read The Finnish Way, Finding Courage, Wellness, and Happiness Through the Power of Sisu by Katja Pantsar, and Extreme North, A Cultural History by Bernd Brunner. So the first one, The Finnish Way, this was all about the concept of Sisu, which I think I've talked about it on previous videos, is the Finnish idea of resilience and toughness and embracing adversity and challenges. Life life gives you challenges, and it's better to go through them with a spirit of like, let's take this on, versus just letting, feeling defeated at every turn. Extreme North was just a kind of a historical primer on perceptions of the Arctic, kind of from a English to Scandinavian explorer perspective. I'm gonna lie, I thought that one was a bit dry. If you're a big history buff, you might be into it. One of the more intriguing fiction reads was Robert Dugoni's The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell. Follows this kid from birth through various stages of his life. I think my favorite read from the year prior was Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, and this one seemed to hit some very similar notes. Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell was a good read. Slow Noodles by Shantanu Gon, I hope I said that right, was a memoir. It was a food memoir from let me see if I get the details right, like a Cambodian refugee family who grew up, who were displaced into Vietnam. I feel bad about how I'm probably butchering some of those details. But essentially, her mom had to flee from her childhood village and then later to the United States. And so this is actually her, I guess, biography that she wrote about her mom. Food is just this ongoing theme throughout, but also family, and a first-hand look into some of the conflicts throughout the 70s and 80s in Southeast Asia. This was just, part of the reason why I'm not remembering the specific details too well is just the heart of the story, just the relationships between her mom and her sister and all that are standing out to me even more. Okay, another food-related read, Great Olive Pig by Matt Golding. Matt Golding had a big year. I know him and Renee Redzepi just had a Apple TV series come out, kind of in the food and travel spirit. Matt Golding tends to go deep into specific places and spends a long time unpacking their culinary contributions to the world. And so Great Olive Pig, if you couldn't tell by those ingredients, is about Spanish cuisine in particular. And I learned so much about this. I got to go to Spain this year, which is cool, but I got to go there with a lot of new knowledge on paella. It was fun learning about, just the Spain's own internalized perception of their own food culture. He has, I'm trying to remember some of the names of his other titles. I think it's like Rice Noodle Fish for Japan, and wine, pasta, something else for Italy. But so he kind of has a series in this style. And if the rest are like this, I want to check them out. All right, speaking of things that I kind of took an obsession with, I got really into the culture of running in Kenya and why Kenya has become this hub of so many legendary runners. So I read Running with the Kenyans by Adharanand Finn. He goes to Kenya and spends time training with some elite Kenyan runners and athletes. It's cool getting to just learn more about why that happened, how that dynamic was built up. I love these types of books where people want to investigate a question that they have about a place, and so they just firsthand go there and explore. I read this book called Looks Like We're Running by Dustin Riedsel. This was just a book about someone, I kind of just wanted to chase a running book with another running book, I guess. So this was a fairly comedic book written about someone's transformation and journey into becoming a runner. I'm not gonna lie, I don't remember this as well as I remember most other books. All right, I read Soundtracks by John Acuff. It was a very quick read. The whole idea is, you have your soundtrack. What are these ideas, messages you played yourself over and over again as you do your work, as you live your life, and how do you choose better ones? Jonathan Haidt, The Anxious Generation, was probably one of the most talked about books. Smartphones are ruining the generation of kids that are out there. Not just smartphones, but smartphones, social media, and all that. Yeah, he includes a lot of scientific validation of this idea. And yeah, it does paint a picture and gives you good reason to be concerned about just the, bringing up kids in a world where that's happening. Simultaneously, he argues that kids are losing the ability to just go play outside. They're losing their independent spirit and their ability to feel confident just out in the real world physically. And I I agree with these ideas a lot. At the same time, I'm like, to some extent, you have to accept the fact that this is the world now, and this is the world that the kids are going to grow up in, and you got to figure out how to do it. It's really hard to walk something back once it's out there. It's also like, I also think that sometimes when you just try and outright ban something or make it off limits, you are essentially making that thing more alluring. So he does have some practical steps, and he does mention that, it's not just going to take, one person being more strict with their kids. It's going to take just a cultural shift. I read Prisoner of Heaven by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. Excellent Spanish writer. Lots of magical realism going on here. There were a couple plot points where I had trouble tracking what was going on, probably because I was reading this at night, and its plot is a little bit sophisticated at parts, but I really enjoy Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I really enjoy Carlos Ruiz Zafón. He's a great writer, and this was a solid book. I would actually not be opposed to rereading it, just to go over some of those details again. All right, Deanna and I decided to read Beartown by Fredrik Backman together. The only other thing I'm familiar from him is A Man Called Ove. I see his books everywhere. They seem to have that uplifting Matt Haig style. So I thought Beartown's one of the ones I hear about more often. It follows a hockey team in a very small rural town that just lives for hockey. There were some points that kind of felt like you saw them coming the whole time, but it was all right. And I do want to read more from this author. Blood at the Root by Ladarian Williams. This was such an interesting, fun, fast-paced read. This is the literary world that I want to go back to. It's a school for kids with magical abilities, and it happens to be an HBCU. I think a lot of the storyline was inspired by the Jena 6 in Louisiana. I really liked it. Lots of great references to Haitian mythology and spiritual practices and Yoruba beliefs. Wellness by Nathan Hill. On the surface, I don't know how to explain this plot without making it sound kind of boring. It follows this couple from the time they meet and fall in love to when they start getting older. They question things in their relationship. They go through career shifts. They have a kid. Lots of things don't go as planned. But I just loved it. It was such a believable portrayal of this relationship over time. If you read Tomorrow, 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 and you like that, I feel like this hits a very similar note. It did so effectively. I really like this one. The Understory by Laura Ferguson Wilbur. This one was a spiritual memoir. I read through it pretty quickly, so to be honest, not a whole lot sticks with me, but a lot of it kind of overlaid her spiritual development with ecological metaphors, so it's no surprise why I read it. I read The House on the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. It's one of Deanna's favorites, I think, of all time, and so she's been wanting me to read it for some time, and I did. And I enjoyed it, probably not to the extent that she did, or to the extent that a lot of people have, because I know this is just a widely loved book. It was good. I'm not gonna shade it or anything. I just don't think I connected to it quite in the same way a lot of people have. But the characters were great. The writing was very easy to read. Fun times. I read this book called Woven by Meredith Miller. So Deanna actually read it as part of a book club at our church, and then we just talked about it so much that I ended up reading it secondhand and then just deciding I'm just gonna read this for myself. I forget what the subtitle is for the book, but it's like basically how to raise your kids raising your kids in a way where they don't develop religious trauma and need tons of therapy for it. No, that's not the title, but something like that. It's essentially about, raising your kids with faith, or at least with an exposure and invitation to faith in a way that's not coercive, where whatever happens is authentic and develops to them, and how to practice faith as a family with kids. I really liked this book. I found its suggestions to be very practical, very applicable, especially because that's where we're at. If you're not, if that's not something you want to do, then you probably wouldn't get much out of this book. And it is written from a Christian standpoint, but yeah, I think a lot of people realize that more often than not, the ways that kids are introduced to their faith comes with a lot of baggage, comes with a lot of ideas that don't serve you well in the long run. And you also just don't want to be coercive about it. You want it to be genuine. I like the ideas that were here. One thing I really appreciate about the ideas in this book is it's very much like find what works for your family. You don't have to just take on all these rigid practices and disciplines because you feel like you're supposed to. Like, look at what's part of your family's identity, what's part of your family's story, and do that. Just dig deeper into that story, and therein lies the spiritual significance. Okay, this is how you know it's my reading list, because I immediately went from reading that to reading The Chronicles of Doom by S.J. Fernando Jr., which is just a biography on MF Doom, the late rapper, perhaps one of my favorite rappers from the mid-2000s while I was in high school. Just an impressive lyricist. This was his biography, so just learning more about his life. He was a really interesting guy, a real more complex figure. I should have figured him to be a complex figure because his rhymes are complex, but yeah, this was a good look. And I don't read this genre of musical biography very often, but I like this one. All right, this next one might be my favorite nonfiction read of the year. There's Always This Year by Hanif Abdurraqib. I love Hanif Abdurraqib's writing. I am always blown away by how he manages to just weave in the things he loves, basketball and music, and pull meaning out of them. So, he wrote a lot of this as a reflection on the place you come from and growing up and getting older and seeing some people move away and some people stick around, and people's relationships with where they're from change and evolve over time. And what better way to do that than to draw all these parallels with the career of LeBron James and other basketball players, but mostly basketball players from the Ohio area. He does this really well. And if I could ever write about I get a lot of inspiration from his writing. I want to be able to write about life and the deeper things I find important through the lens of the things I find exciting in that seamless way that he does. And finally, the most recent book I read this year, The Ministry of Time by Kalyan Bradley, a really fun fiction read. So it's in this world where people have figured out how to bring back people from past eras. So you have these former, I don't know what you call it, explorers and guys from the 1800s who are now living in present day, trying to be assimilated into society, kind of as though they were refugees, I think is how the novel puts it. What soon follows are a bunch of plot twists, a bunch of what's really going on here, and interesting commentary on modern life. This was a really well done book. It was one where I truly had a fun time reading it. All right, that was eclectic, wasn't it? Yeah, my reading tends to be all over the place. I like it that way, and I hope I get some more reads in next year. If you have some stuff you think I should really check out, let me know. I would do the same. I just did. Okay, hope you had some good reads too this year and in the year ahead. Later.